A rumor claiming Neil Druckmann is on his way out of Naughty Dog, and how a single tweet managed to send the whole internet spinning. The short version is that the specific claim barely has a source behind it, yet the speed at which people believed it tells you everything about the whole Intergalactic. The Heretic Prophet is already sitting in. I want to be straight with you from the opening minute because I am not going to sell you a headline I cannot stand behind. Right now, nobody has confirmed that Neil Druckmann is leaving Naughty Dog. No reliable industry reporter has put their name on it. Druckmann still runs the studio, he still holds the director credit on Intergalactic, and not one person with an actual track record has said otherwise. If you showed up expecting a funeral, go ahead and set the flowers down for a minute. Here is the piece that actually earns your attention. This rumor did not crawl out of a vacuum, and it did not travel because people are gullible. It traveled because the ground underneath it was already soft. When a studio goes 7 years without shipping a brand new game, when its next big project is reportedly crunching 2 full years ahead of release, and when its flagship reveal got rejected the instant it dropped, a rumor like this needs no evidence at all. All it needs is a match, and somebody struck one. Let us start with that match because you deserve to see exactly how flimsy the thing is. The rumor traces back to one tweet posted on June 29, 2026 from an account called Kelvin using the handle KimaMr. That single post claimed Druckmann could be walking over a lack of funding for Intergalactic, that he had stopped showing up at the studio daily because the game was struggling to come together, and that Naughty Dog itself sat on the chopping block at Sony. One account, no insider credentials, zero corroboration. That is the entire foundation. From there, it did what these things always do, which meant it got scooped up and amplified within days. The commentator Smash JT shared it around near the start of July, and to his credit, he hedged hard, basically admitting he did not really believe it. Though the way the industry has been trending, nothing shocks him anymore. That one sentence is the real engine behind this whole story. Notice that nobody is claiming proof. What they are claiming is that they would not be surprised, which is a wildly different thing. And it reveals how people feel about Naughty Dog far more than it reveals anything about Druckmann's actual job. The debunk arrived quickly too. Gaming outlet Playfront ran a piece calling the rumor nonsense, and their reasoning holds up. Druckmann remains officially co-president, he stays deeply involved in the project, and the fact that he is not standing out front every single day fits the normal rhythm for a creative lead deep into a huge production. That is strategic management, not a man quietly clearing out his desk. When your entire theory boils down to nobody having spotted him lately, you do not have a theory, you have a mood. So on the narrow question of whether Neil Druckmann is leaving Naughty Dog, the honest answer stays simple. Nothing gives you a reason to believe he is. Any video screaming that he got fired and Intergalactic got cancelled invented that outright, taking a stray tweet and cashing it in for a thumbnail. Now we reach the interesting part, and this is where I stop being polite about the studio. The reason this rumor refused to fade out in some forgotten corner of the internet is that the material underneath it happens to be real, not the departure, the conditions around it. And those conditions did not come from angry fans, they came from Jason Schreier at Bloomberg, who is roughly as reliable as this beat gets. Back in December 2025, Schreier reported that Naughty Dog had rolled out mandatory overtime. For close to 7 weeks, beginning in late October, staff were told to log a minimum of 8 extra hours every week and track that overtime in an internal spreadsheet. 60 hours a week became the ceiling, and everyone had to sit in the office all 5 days rather than the usual 3. None of this fed a big public showcase. The whole grind existed to finish an internal demo, so the parent company, Sony Interactive Entertainment, could sit down and review the studio's progress. Let that settle for a second because the timing is the tell. By that same reporting, this game targets a mid-2027 release, which meant the studio pushed its people into overtime 2 years out from launch. Not to hit a release date, not to ship anything to players, but to prove to its own corporate parent that the project stands on solid ground. Crunch this early breaks the usual pattern. Normally, that sprint arrives at the tail end of development when a team races toward a finish line, so grinding 2 years out left some employees openly wondering how ugly it gets later. That is a room full of people bracing for the road ahead. The reason for all that overtime cuts even deeper, because the game had already blown past several deadlines. That phrase belongs to the reporting itself. The crunch existed purely to haul production back on track after it fell behind, which paints a clear picture. A project running late, dragged manually back into position, needing a special demo to calm Sony down, and still not expected until 2027. Both Sony and Naughty Dog declined to comment on any of it. Let me connect those dots the way a fan connects them, because this is exactly the part the studio's defenders love to skate past. If Intergalactic lands in 2027, that stretches to roughly 7 years since Naughty Dog's last new game, The Last of Us Part 2, back in 2020. 7 years, and inside that gap, the output amounted to remasters. One of the most celebrated studios on the planet spent an entire console generation handing us remasters and a reveal trailer. So when an anonymous account tweets that the game is struggling and Sony is applying pressure, the sourcing might be garbage, yet the underlying feeling did not appear from nowhere. Nobody invented the idea that this project is troubled. People looked at a 7-year drought, early crunch, missed deadlines, and a corporate check-in, and they drew a line. That line might overshoot the truth, but you cannot pretend the dots are not sitting right there. Hold on to one detail above all the others. Look closely at who actually absorbs the damage in this reporting, because it is not Druckmann. The people taking the hit are the developers, the ones logging 8 extra hours into a spreadsheet, the ones ordered into the office 5 days instead of 3, the ones quietly wondering whether this is the worst of it or merely the warm-up. Anyone cheering for a rumor that Druckmann might walk should understand that the verified suffering here happened several rungs below him, landing on people who never get a press tour. That is worth sitting with before anybody throws a party. Let us talk about why this game carried controversy long before any crunch report or departure rumor showed up, because the reception on day one is the whole reason the rumor found purchase. Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet, closed out the Game Awards in December 2024, and this was supposed to be a moment. This marked Naughty Dog's first brand new original IP since The Last of Us, all the way back in 2013, more than a decade of waiting, and the studio had been quietly building it since 2020. The premise genuinely sings on paper. You step into Jordan A. Munn, a bounty hunter stranded on a planet called Semperia, a world that went silent hundreds of years earlier, where everyone who ever flew in to investigate simply vanished. Jordan wants to become the first person in over 600 years to escape its orbit. Tati Gabrielle carries the lead, while Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross handle the music. On paper, that is a stacked deck. The trailer went live and the internet did what the internet does. Dislikes buried the reveal almost immediately, and the totals shifted depending on which upload you checked and when. So let me stay careful here. Inside roughly a day, one report clocked the PlayStation upload at over 34,000 dislikes against around 30,000 likes. Right around that same window, Forbes tracked the PlayStation version at roughly 38,000 likes to 51,000 dislikes, with the Naughty Dog upload sitting near 29,000 to 40,000. One gaming site cited a figure of roughly 125,000 dislikes as the counts kept climbing. Treat every one of those as a snapshot rather than a final score because they moved constantly, yet the direction stays obvious. This reveal got ratioed straight into the dirt. One small detail shows you the studio saw it coming. The moment the trailer went live, Naughty Dog switched off the comments on its own upload, while Sony's version left them running. You do not preemptively shut off the comments on the biggest reveal of your year unless some part of you already knows the reception turns into a problem. That is a studio flinching before the punch even lands. I want to be fair about what the Backlash actually contained, because it never was one clean thing. A slice of it belonged to the ugly, lazy category, people furious about the protagonist's appearance, hurling the usual buzzwords at a bald female lead, and that part deserves none of your time and represents none of the fans I stand with today. A separate and genuinely defensible slice targeted something else entirely. Product placement stuffed the trailer wall to wall. A space-themed Porsche, Adidas. Sony's own branding stitched right into the frame, and viewers clocked it instantly. You unveil your big artistic swing, your first fresh world in over a decade, and you decorate it with sneaker logos and car brands. Raising an eyebrow at that counts as completely fair, and the audience raised it hard. That is the environment in full. A reveal that got rejected, comments switched off in advance, real questions about branding, and a studio that had already gone quiet for years. That is the coffin, and every new development since then has driven another nail straight into it. Which brings us to how Druckmann himself has handled all of this, because his posture feeds the rumor directly. Back in May 2025 on the Sacred Symbols podcast, someone asked him about the mounting criticism, and his answer amounted to a shrug. He figured there was not much he could add to that conversation, said there is stuff swirling in the media right now that you have to tune out, and explained that you simply stick to what you believe in. He also called himself as excited for this game as he has been for anything he ever built. On one level, fair enough. An artist shielding their vision from an angry crowd is a real and respectable instinct, and nobody wants games designed by a dislike counter. A very thin line separates protecting your vision from refusing to hear the room though, and Druckmann's public stance has planted itself firmly on the not listening side of it. Once you build a reputation as the guy who tunes out the audience stops extending you the benefit of the doubt, and that is precisely the account running a deficit when a rumor like this drops. If people trusted the studio, one anonymous tweet would bounce right off. It did not bounce, it stuck, and it stuck because the goodwill has already been spent. To be clear, the people actually building this game never checked out. Tati Gabrielle, the lead, met the backlash by saying it only pushed her to work harder. The crew keeps grinding, literally, according to the Crunch reporting. Everyone at the bottom pours themselves into this thing, and the disconnect lives at the top, in the messaging. In the 7 years of near silence broken only by remasters, in a reveal that basically told you to go buy a Porsche. Let us carry all of this back to the rumor, because now you can see it plainly. The claim that Neil Druckmann is leaving Naughty Dog has nothing solid holding it up. I will repeat it once more so nobody clips this out of context. No credible evidence puts Druckmann on his way out. The lack of funding angle and the studio is on the chopping block angle both trace back to one tweet with air behind it. Any thumbnail screaming that he got fired and the game got cancelled comes from a creator guessing and counting on you never checking. The reason the rumor spread the way it did is the actual story, because the conditions that make it believable are not fabricated. 7 years without a new game. Only remasters this generation. A project that has missed deadlines. Early crunch 2 years before launch. A demo the studio had to build purely to reassure its own parent company. A reveal trailer buried in dislikes with the comments switched off in advance. And a studio head whose public message to everyone worried about all of it has essentially been that he is not listening. Stack every one of those in a single pile, and the survival of a baseless tweet makes perfect sense. Once a studio burns through this much credibility, it stops earning the benefit of the doubt, and every rumor starts landing like it might finally be the real one. That is the fans reacting to a pattern the studio built with its own 2 hands. Here is where I land on the nail in the coffin question. On its own, no. A rumor with one anonymous source drives no nail into anything. What it does is function as a symptom and a loud one. A flashing sign that the audience already decided which way this story bends and now simply waits on confirmation. When people stand this ready to believe the worst about your studio, the tweet was never the real problem. The real problem is everything that made the tweet sound plausible in the first place. Naughty Dog can still flip this around. Intergalactic could surface in 2027 and turn out brilliant, and a lot of this noise evaporates the second there is a great game to point at, which has happened before with this exact studio. Today though, they run on fumes and a decade-old reputation, and the fans feel every bit of it. This rumor was never the story. The rumor is just the moment everyone realized how little faith remains in the tank, and that, far more than any tweet, is the thing Naughty Dog genuinely has to worry about. That is where I will leave it. If Druckmann really does walk someday, remember that it did not begin here with this rumor. It began years ago with a studio that went quiet, planted logos in its dreams, told its fans it was not listening, and then acted surprised when nobody trusted it anymore. Keep your eyes on the verified material, ignore the thumbnails promising you a firing, and if this one earned your time, you already know what to do.